What makes boxing movies so compelling? For me, it's the way these movies present complex characters and use the ring as a magnifying glass into their psyche, but it wasn't always like that. The release of Rocky in 1976 fundamentally altered how boxing movies are approached and laid a groundwork for strong character dramas mixed with exciting fight sequences. With that, I'm going to look at how boxing movies have evolved from their roots in silent comedy through the Rocky Renaissance into the modern day. Boxing movies before Rocky typically focused on the idea of boxing rather than the boxers themselves or the ring. In these movies, the boxing ring was used as a climax that solved the narrative arc of the film, but didn't give much insight into the boxer as a person. Silent comedies such as Battling Butler introduced boxing to the big screen and often involved a boxing match at the end to complete the idea the film was trying to portray, with a common theme in silent comedies being that the main character is either mistaken for a boxer by a love interest or specifically becomes a boxer to impress a love interest. These films use the idea of boxing and the boxing ring as a mirror to society and highlighting social expectations, typically by having physically underwhelming actors like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin be forced into boxing and then having to pretend to be something that they're not. Battling Butler specifically involved Buster Keaton's character, who's a millionaire, being mistaken for a boxer by a woman he loves and having to keep up the facade in order to keep her love. The boxing films of the silent comedy era were the first steps into the genre and used boxing as setup for a joke, but didn't focus much on the sport itself as much as the idea of boxing in what would have been the pop culture of the time. As film moves into the noir period of the 40s and 50s, boxing films similarly become darker. Similar to silent films, these movies use the boxing ring as a mirror to society, but tend to focus more on ideas of corruption and greed, portraying boxing as the center of corruption that ruins lives. A large number of boxing films in the 40s involve a boxer involved with corrupt management, often wanting the main character of the film to throw the fight. The ending of these films usually involves the boxer refusing to throw the fight and as such are unable to fight again, with the fighter in body and soul being threatened by the promoter and the fighter in the setup being mugged by gangsters. These films give more insight into the characters than the silent comedies that came before them, but they're still more focused on the idea of boxing as an institution rather than examining the arc of fighting and how boxers prepare. While boxing films of the 40s and 50s do sometimes examine how boxing affects the life of boxers, the characters feel like a canvas for the themes of the film to be applied to, rather than a complex character that the audience can relate to and root for. The release of Rocky in 1976 completely redefines the boxing film genre. The focus is no longer on the idea of boxing, but rather on the life of a specific boxer and how boxing affects his life. Rather than fights being used to examine aspects of society, they provide insight into the character of Rocky Balboa and act as stepping stones along his path of character growth. The movie follows Rocky as he builds his boxing career and a relationship with his girlfriend Adrian. The movie isn't particularly focused on the politics of boxing, but rather it uses boxing matches as a magnifying glass for Rocky's character traits. Rocky is an underdog with unwavering determination, which is perfectly shown through the fight at the end of the film. Rocky is fighting the heavyweight champion in a fight that he should never realistically be able to win, but he puts all of his energy into training for the fight. The whole film is focused on Rocky's character growth both as a person and as a boxer, with the final fight against Apollo Creed showcasing this perfectly. His goal in the fight isn't to win, but just to go the full 15 rounds to prove to himself that he wasn't a bad boxer, which he ends up doing. The way the fight ends the movie makes it more than just about a boxing match. It becomes an uplifting story of determination told through the lens of the sport of boxing, something that films after Rocky expand on and twist in their own unique ways. Films before Rocky were broadly about boxing's place in society and used it to shine a light on society broadly, and Rocky redefined the genre to be more focused on an individual boxer and their life path, with boxing in the ring serving to highlight character change. Raging Bull takes the character-driven focus of Rocky and twists it to focus on someone the audience shouldn't cheer for, real-life boxer Jake LaMotta. Where Rocky used fights to highlight how the ring is an extension of his personal growth, Raging Bull uses boxing fights to show negative personal character growth as a result of improved boxing performance. The fight scenes make Jake out to be a dominant force which opposes the scenes in Jake's personal life, which are slower cut but still chaotic, showing Jake unable to deal with people and control his emotions in typical social settings, where he becomes enraged over minor issues. As the film goes on, Jake focuses more and more on boxing and less on his social life, thinking that if he can win the championship then everything else will fall into place. This creates an interesting dynamic for the audience as they want him to succeed in boxing, but they don't like him in his normal life scenes because of how disrespectful he is. The way the film visually represents the ring perfectly reflects Jake's obsession with boxing that is causing his home life to fail. The film portrays the ring as if it's another world entirely, separate from his normal life. The audience can barely be seen, and there's a thick layer of fog that covers everything, as if Jake is focused only on the ring itself when boxing, losing sight of the real world that boxing takes place in. This disconnect between boxing and the real world extends to the way the camera is used once fights start. His home life scenes are a slow buildup of anger as Jake is unable to handle his emotions, but once he enters the ring, the camera explodes with energy through both its movements and the way it cuts rapidly, as if Jake is a spring that instantly lets out its energy as soon as stepping into the ring. Just as the ring highlighted Rocky's determination in the face of impossible odds, the ring in Raging Bull shows Jake LaMotta's obsession with being a dominant boxer by any means necessary, neglecting his personal relationships in an effort to win the boxing championship. Southpaw takes the character structure of Raging Bull and inverts it. Rather than losing his social connections as a result of being obsessed with boxing, the main boxer of Southpaw, Billy Hope, loses his family with his wife dying and his daughter being taken into state custody, sending him into a downward spiral. He returns to boxing in order to be able to regain custody of his daughter, and the film uses his journey of training to mirror his journey of emotional recovery and rebonding with his daughter. Where Raging Bull uses the boxing matches as a contrast to LaMotta's family life, Southpaw uses the matches to highlight milestones along his path to improvement, similar to how Rocky uses boxing, but in Southpaw there's a more direct link between boxing and recovery. For Billy Hope, boxing provides the discipline and career that he needs to recover emotionally and socially, where in Rocky, boxing is used as a reflection of his determination both in and out of the ring. These differences between how Southpaw and Raging Bull approach the boxer's relationship with others can be seen in how the boxing matches are portrayed. Raging Bull's fights largely ignore the audience because the fight is Jake's escape from society, but Southpaw features the camera being used similar to how a boxing match is seen on TV, outside the ring looking in at the boxers, with the audience in the background. This is done to highlight how for Billy Hope, boxing serves as his avenue to reconnect with the world. Without boxing, Jake LaMotta is stuck with his family, where Billy Hope is isolated from his family without boxing. This is even more clear when Billy gets knocked down, with the camera cutting from Billy to ringside where his wife is typically located, showing the connection between boxing and family that Billy Hope has in his life. It's an interesting take on the boxing character's story that's more uplifting than Raging Bull, and more social than Rocky's story of one man's unwavering determination. Boxing movies before and after Rocky are almost completely different genres. Before Rocky released, boxing movies were only tangentially about boxing, either approaching the idea of boxers as legendary heroes or seeing boxing as a venue for corruption and gambling. The release of Rocky fundamentally shifts the genre into focusing more on boxers specifically as people, with the sport of boxing serving as a magnifying glass for a character's inner growth. The framework that Rocky laid out transformed boxing into one of my favorite genres, and there are tons of great boxing movies I didn't mention, so comment your favorite and make sure to subscribe for more film breakdowns weekly.